Please consider donating to the GoFundMe Benjamin set up before his untimely death to help alleviate the burden his passing is going to create upon his family. I've linked it in the description. Last night, on December 30th, 2020, Benjamin Smith, better known as Apollo Legend, made the decision to end his own life. He was 23 years old. If that name only sounds familiar to you in a passing sense, then you probably know him for exposing the corruption in long-standing video game world record website Twin Galaxies. Namely, he exposed Todd Rogers for having countless fraudulent world records, including one in an Atari game called Dragster that was given the distinction of longest-standing world record by Guinness. Obviously, this was because his score was impossible to attain. He also provided strong evidence that Billy Mitchell's scores in Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. were fraudulent, or at the very least played on an emulator, despite Mitchell's insistence to the contrary. This would prove a lot more costly than the Rogers exposure. Mitchell is notoriously litigious, you see, and he soon filed a $1 million lawsuit against Apollo that ended up settled out of court. Before I go any further, let me make my bias clear. I was a fan and friend of Apollo Legend. On a surface level, I think his commitment to principle is evident in his work. He was unafraid to dive into the jaws of controversy, be it dressing up as Billy Mitchell to interview him despite the ongoing lawsuit, or making videos he knew would attract the ire of the social media mob, such as a defense of Our White Goose and an expose on games done quick. Naturally, political lines have been drawn on both of these issues. You know it's time to roll your eyes and depart when the phrase literally Hitler is being thrown around, so I won't explore them more than this. They've been talked about enough. The point is they were an impetus in his dispute with DarkViperAU, yielding these largely unfriendly videos. But more than that, they were consistent with the principled man he was in private as well, if even to a fault. I can personally attest to him being equally principled in private. When Twin Galaxies corruptly denied me a Tetris world record, Apollo was more than willing to help and advise me, even offering his 200k plus subscriber platform despite me being a complete nobody on the scene. His personal Discord is filled with similar stories of him going out of his way to help people who couldn't offer him anything in return, be it video editing or mere thoughtful conversation. Also, he had a hilarious sense of humor. Now, YouTube has repeatedly pulled Apollo Legend's final video, but I firmly believe that everyone deserves to have their last words heard. Everyone. So I link his departing note in the description below. If you can't stomach watching it though, I understand, and I'll sum it up thus. For 7 minutes and 45 seconds, Apollo Legend is visibly pained and dejected. He describes the excruciating physical pain his deteriorating condition has brought him, largely from scoliosis. He says he'd have to be hospitalized soon if he continued to live, and continued that his medication makes him vomit just as much as the pain from not taking it makes him vomit. He also repeatedly says that only he is to be blamed for this decision. He makes a passing reference to the disputes he's had online, but he clearly dismisses them not only as coming with the territory of his content creation, but as warranted criticism. But that's not what you're hearing from sources on Reddit, Twitter, and other sites though, is it? Instead, you're seeing tripe articles like this, sensationalizing his suicide as a master plan of manipulation to destroy DarkViperAU and EasyScape. Dark Viper's response to the situation largely hasn't helped this perception, but we'll get to that later. The one sentence that they're extrapolating their clickbait from comes not from the video, but from the video description. In it, his third sentence is, "Thank you to Dark Viper and EasyScape for giving me the final push that I needed." So therefore he deserves all these calumnies casting him as a monster willing to kill himself just to hurt two people who made videos about him, right? It's a literally addictive thrill in our generation to cast people as monsters that way. I understand, but I beseech you, please hear me out for just a few more minutes. Listen closely and see the forest for the trees here. Apollo continues, "I tried to hold myself back in the video, but I can't help it. People have no clue what I deal with every day. When I was about 5 years old, my dad threw me on the ground and covered my mouth and nose, to where I couldn't breathe and screamed into my face because I wanted to play some game that he was playing, and that's how he treated us every day. I couldn't even tell that story without crying until I was 18 or so. I have scoliosis, which causes my back, hips, and shoulders to ache constantly. I'm sick every day. I throw up often. My medicine makes me vomit, but then if I don't take it, I vomit. My body is completely useless. I can't do anything. I'm completely out of my mind. All my thoughts are so painful and aggravating, and because I'm mentally ill, everything I say online gets used to make me look like a bad person. I'm not a bad person. I'm under incredible stress. Try living with this much pain and let's see the decisions you make. That's only the stuff I'm comfortable talking about. There's more that's even worse. The speedrun community are such hypocrites. They pretend to care so much about everyone's feelings, and then in the same video they call you retarded scum. I know I exposed people for cheating, but I never said anything like that. They tell me they agree with me privately and then publicly betray me. If I complained about my life all the time, then I bet they'd see me as relatable. But because I try to push through it and act normal, they hate me. He then thanks the people that were friendly to him in his last bits of life. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. That description is a meandering mess of emotion from a dying man. It's aimless. It's a cry. And that third sentence is no different. It's a lashing out. It's a lashing out from a deeply hurt man. It's a lashing out from a man that's about to die. The fact that that sentence runs contrary to what he said in the video for 8 minutes straight is all the more telling. Apollo Legend simply was not in the correct frame of mind to comport himself properly when he typed this description, whenever that was. I would have liked to believe the fact that he committed suicide alone was evidence enough of that mental state. To address everyone saying that typing that sentence is an unforgivably baleful, manipulative, and abusive attempt to, quote, take Dark Viper and Easy Escape down with him, try to consider this. People lash out when they're under immense duress. Despite what the cancel culture so many of you love demands of us, human beings are actually very, very imperfect, and we're constantly behaving imperfectly. So many of you have posted comments calling him scum, saying that you would never do such a thing in his situation. I pray that you're never in his situation to find out whether or not you utter a dying fuck you at someone you sincerely believed wronged you before taking your own life. Similarly, I need to address everyone grave dancing for even a single second. Stop. You're trash. The modicum of joy you're getting from celebrating his suicide is nothing compared to the pain you're causing his family and friends in doing so. I know that means nothing to you, but here's food for thought. Apollo was at the culmination of a life of pain when he posted one passive-aggressive sentence at Easy Escape and Dark Viper amidst a storm of emotion. What's your excuse for dancing on the grave of a victim of mental illness before the body is even cold? I understand that some of you are being emboldened by the video that DarkViperAU put out in response to this ordeal, so I need to address it, specifically this 40-second clip.
While he said in the video that no online petty stuff was the reason why he did what he did, he took that one last moment to write a description of the video where he said, "Thanks Dark Viper and Easy Escape for giving me the push that I needed." And he thanked Keemstar for being a good friend. That certainly sounds like the Apollo legend that I came to know.
Now a quick question, what is the primary emotion you take away from DarkViperAU here? The answer is anger, and that much is completely understandable and justifiable. Having your name tied to someone else's suicide is terrible, and DarkViperAU doesn't deserve it. Like we discussed earlier, Apollo himself said as much repeatedly. So why was that one sentence, that one lashing out from a man about to die, all he cared about in this video about a man that committed suicide hours prior, insofar as he never uttered the phrase rest in peace in it or linked to Apollo Legends fundraiser? Here's the unfortunate answer.
Because understandably, my videos will now receive endless amounts of dislikes, hate-filled comments, as I imagine Easy Escapes will as well.
Analytics. YouTube analytics. But Viper is smarter than this, and the numbers speak for themselves. This video is easily his most controversial subject matter to date, and it's received 40k likes to 2k dislikes in less than a day. Viper knows Apollo was massively unpopular until his death, partly due to Viper's own exposés on him, and Apollo's supposed blaming of Viper for his suicide only furthers the negative image of him dominating the social media narrative as I speak. This much is evident in the cancellation that contributed to Apollo's death. Being a victim of such a monster as Apollo, post-mortem, can only be a boon for any content creator, and I think Viper knows that. Admittedly emotional on the day of Apollo's death, and ruder than I'd like to be, I called DarkViperAU out on this in the comment section of his video. He either misunderstood a bit, or pretended to misunderstand a bit, the point that I was making, and responded that if he had any desire for profit he would make the video public, as opposed to unlisted. Well, he made it public a few hours after our exchange. I believe that two things can be true at once. Dark Viper is both sincerely angry that his name was attached to Apollo Legends' death in the minute but overblown capacity that it was, and rightfully so, but he's also smart enough to know that this affront from the grave by a man who died hated is an analytics net positive for him. That being said, I'm not trying to call Viper a piece of shit. Just as I called for us to understand the emotional mess that was Apollo's mind in making that description, I forced myself against my own bias to understand that I'd be defensive in Viper's situation and might act rashly as well. It's a lesson as old as the internet not to go online in an emotional state. I'd be remiss as well if I didn't mention that he eventually linked Apollo's fundraiser in his comments, when he made the video public, donating $500 himself. If you're still watching, thank you, and I'm ending with this. Cancel culture is terrible. Stop demonizing people. You might be saying to yourself, wait, didn't the guy you're defending get famous demonizing people? And I'd answer no, and definitely not in his mind. Here's what weighed on him the most. To hear him say it, he never made a video wherein he tried to convince others that someone else was scum. Exposing cheating was a pursuit he considered entirely evidence-based, and he wanted only to better the community, not to excise anyone. That's pretty consistent with someone who continuously tried to see the good in the subjects of his video, be it Our White Goose or Chibi. I know Boogie2988 is largely unpopular these days, but he made a similar point on Twitter and I couldn't agree more. Remember that there's a lot of imperfection in all of us. A culture that demands perfection and simultaneously refuses forgiveness is simply unsustainable. Forgive Apollo Legend for his emotional mess of a dying note that was his description. There's a little Apollo Legend in all of us, including you. Rest in peace, my friend.